I don't think that Dropbox is used all the techiest power users. I don't really care about power user or developer or tech. More about like I don't know, kind of Google Doc competitor. They don't want your actual file, how everything is a cloud. So I'm grateful. I don't like Dropbox anymore. I still using it. It's saved to my bacon so many times. I also do run a time machine or backplate. I have sort of three ways. And backplace is essentially like a Dropbox for your entire computer, not modules. I just don't do it. Something they speaking my CPU or anything like that. I don't know. I still recommend you do it. Also, as a teacher, that my students to still do that. I have so many times people accidentally delete something actually when they're using a command line or cop trying to delete so many horror stories. If you don't have a rock solid backup in place, that you definitely need to something like Dropbox world. So that's my answer to that. And a lot of but it's working for me. It saves my bacon. I appreciate you. Yes, totally. All right. That is Minnesota. 20 minutes now. We'll wrap it up and we'll see you in the next. Yeah, everything. We flew with for baby first flight. Anything I say doing great. A little first thing on the bike. It's good as good go. You know, the airport sucks. So happy with the child. Have never done this before. The trip was great. I got to see his family, got to hit Michigan or the base. There is someone on Twitter try like every first time hear this podcast. The chorus likes their tweet. I like this is my internet celebrity. They were tweets like the query liking may have been like will shut it down. Try sponsor. It will have a hookup. Please put us in touch. We would love sponsored by Create. Alright, let's get into it. We'll talk about the GraphQL today. Well, it's sort of being like a little buzz lately. You hear everybody talking about it to the praise of it. Some licensing stuff a while back. Licensing issue as Reactile 0 or pass out. I'm pretty excited about the graph. I know Scott is as well fairly bad upset. We can just like explain what it is, what we are. So why don't you kick off what is GraphQL, Scott? GraphQL is itself really just a specification for sort of query languages, how your API works instead of hitting in an endpoint with a header API or URL or fetch whatever data they just give to grab all that data, use whatever you want. GraphQL is a writing query on the client side, allowing to specify a particular type of data in shape you want to. When you create your APIs, you create node as such. To hit in fetch and you return data, you basically say give me the post with the post author, oh, by the way, inside the post comments, each post comment author and a post comment body. Awesome query. You want to enjoy to work with, enjoy to look at, relational, all this amazing stuff. I guess that this is the best I can do. I like that. I will give you my stack as well. Fill any hole. So it's not a framework for anything like GraphQL. It's a spike. REST is really JSON. It's a spike. It's not actually idea someone has made. This has come up with it. Every single language is implement this by or Python or any languages. You are going to have a library that will allow you interface with GraphQL library from both the server side and the client side. Your server side will survive a GraphQL feed. Your client side will telling your GraphQL server it specifically ask the thing you want. The rest you ask only for the data you specifically want. Only one API endpoint for like one endpoint for one endpoint for page website. Give me the latest these specific pages. Give me a list of cars. For each cars, give me their engines. I only want, I don't know, anything. This is a stupid examples. I don't care about the rest of the data that come along with that. This really neat. You don't have to make multiple requests. Only have to make one request to the API. Ask for exactly the data you want in that situation. If the data is relational at all, you can nest this query infinitely, just populate the related data without have to how many times we create a new API. You have like give me the top 5 authors with their friend. By the end of the day, you have all these different endpoints, all the different you can pass to your endpoint. The best way I ever heard React is an object where you only provide the properties that you want. It just with the left hand side, you give this back to you populate on the right hand side. One of the important concepts is the standard to a REST API. There are numerous connections to be made. You make a connection to the specific endpoint. With GraphQL, they just one connection to the server. You can use this query. You can get the data you want individual every single time. Like all that prevents how many like repeat trips to a particular API. Some APIs give to array of ID. Hit the API, get more information. With GraphQL query, relational stuff, you can just say, hey, give me all the properties, while the server-side code is gonna figure it out, and the stuff you actually care about, and the user on the client side giving the data you care about without having to worry about this API give this information for other reason to get more information. How many times have you got maybe a list of movies, and that API gave you maybe the movie description, a secondary cause. You end up you want 10 movies, each of them you want a description, 11 different Ajax calls. That's brutal to have to do. Really going to make your apps fast. You don't have to worry about doing any round trips to the or making extra calls or doing one of those things where you have to use paginate but not as much. One of that I really love about of GraphQL query, self-documenting. Just by looking at the query, you know exactly the data. Hinting import is sort of like, okay, I will assume this data is going to be available. Let me even check what's in there. With a GraphQL query, you specific the title, the name, the description, the data coming is not going. if that data actually. So to me, that like self documenting is super nice. Always know what you're getting. Again, that relational stuff is definitely wild, where you can just really get back all kinds of information. Exactly. Another important point is not necessarily you have to start from scratch or replace for your APIs. One of the cool things, if we're talking about server-side rendering and building a GraphQL APIs, that will be a central point to getting data behind the scenes. You can specify the different queries. If you want 6 blog posts, you may query your WordPress latest GitHub projects, your GitHub API. I want my MongoDB. This thing can sit in front of multiple sources of information. If you build something from scratch, maybe you don't have that. Somewhere you multiple pieces of information, you just have to code what's resolver is essentially how do I get this data that the user has requested and bring it back to the GraphQL endpoint and just return that raw data. And to expand on that, Apollo link state package for Apollo really, but let's actually allow you not only query 7 different API from one query, from one GraphQL with a log. You can actually query local state as well. In your GraphQL multiple APIs and your local states all in one query, get that information directly in the that to me just super cool. It was like I don't have to worry about get data from database, local store from API. There's one data source you get your data from. That's super nice. We're gonna talk about Apollo past podcasts before. Maybe let's talk about the front end. Assuming that you have some sort of backend, it's a GraphQL. What your options are? The options are limited in anything, or use one of the out of box. Let's talk about the front end. You are bringing a React in Vue, just Spring or JavaScript. How do you talk? Because you can just use fetch, because you have to specifically format this query in a specific way, right? It's not just JavaScript. You have to call this GraphQL query in JavaScript is a string. It's a little string GraphQL. There is GraphQL syntax. It's not JavaScript. It's very similar. Missing comma, a little things here to use GraphQL client, of which two major ones, Relay and Apollo. Relay made by Facebook, Apollo made by Gas Media Super. It's also a couple others. I have no experience. Check out GraphQL request. It's made by GraphBlooka. It's made by Candera. Nano GraphQL. It's made by Usually. I don't know how to say his last name. I'm sorry. I haven't checked out. So I'm actually building GraphQL course for a couple months now. And when I initially look at that, I just two big ones. Apollo, what is the other ones? Really, I forget it. I also want to say reason. Apollo is for me is a perfect library for dealing with GraphQL, because it does it does a little bit of magic. It takes care of a lot of hard stuff for you, like caching data. You have a query, you have that query for the future. You don't have to think about is this data ready in my cache. If I have this data first, you just shoot this query off, figuring out, do I need to ask for all of this? Do I need ask any of this? Or some of the stuff log give it to you immediately to trap the actual servers. I don't know, speak too much about using a relay. What I have found is that if you have very specific use cases or you need performance of the Apollo, not performance, you can get a little bit customer relay. In my case, I was using Apollo because it does a little bit more for you, and the setup is amazingly fast. You remember like my Redux series 6 video to the first Hello World, you get to the boilerplate setup with the Apollo, you up running. Whoa, this is nice. And then the same experience with Redux. Actually, the same experience choosing Apollo over Relay. I heard a little bit of the documentation. Everything just isn't as easy as Apollo looks. I'm pretty like a low fraction kind of guy. Low fraction setup, keep going and go that direction. That I really love the Apollo. One thing I really like about being able to, this isn't speaking by the way, but being able to incrementally I just added the Apollo. I started with one collection of that stuff and incrementally migrate this over. You don't have to go all in. You try it out in your app or try out Apollo demo environment. You can see the in action. Definitely exciting to how quickly it is to get up and running and have be so performant and caching, all sort of stuff. That's pagination, build refetching of data, refresh this data, refetch, go to the server and refresh that data, or using a mutation automatically have to refetch in the mutation side of things. Let's actually talk about that, the Qualcomm side behind using GraphQL. First, let's hear about our sponsor. Our sponsor today is Snipcart. Snipcart is the entire client-side shopping cart. It's sort of like software as service, have the ability to application that entirely client side, more of doing any of the backend stuff. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. You kick your user off to separate page, brand the same way. I know myself, it kick somebody off in your website, a separate page. How many times? Never mind. Like GraphQL, I don't know. You want to say it's simple, but it's not. But you are learning a new language, right? It's different, like a paradigm shift. Your data, that's how I feel. That is totally different. There's something brand new. There are a couple ideas that you need to nail down before you get into it. The two biggest the one. The idea of queries and mutation. If you on the client side, you want to get the data. That's a query. You can pass arguments to that query. That of queries that GraphQL. That's up to your backend to implement the different arguments. Implement sorting. That is not part of GraphQL. To learn that because it's not really a query language. If you can sort it, you have to pass all that data. It's specific to your API, sort and filter. You get the point. I think it's also initially confusing to me. After I figured it out, limit or sort is no argument you pass through to the API. The API is going to deal with made a little bit more sense to me. Really care is just accepting these arguments in the API is what you need to know doing the limitation. This is now like you often read this Stack Overflow. People are like, MySQL is been do that for years. Postgres is better. This is not what it is at all. You still using any database that you have would have you to interact with that database the way that your GraphQL works. Just find a schema, different field, you different type of different data. Know ahead of time gonna be a string or something like that, and your Python, your MySQL, your Node, your Mongo which work together to get that data. As a resolver, quick side, do you see schema or schema? I say Pure Being, why schema? Why do you say schema? Scheme. I even like call that out in one of my video if I never have any idea. I say most things wrong. I will probably say it. Let's see about that. But yeah, so the concept of a resolver, essentially you talk to your database inside of resolver, whether that's update or using like Mongo's delete or remove it. Inside of this resolver where you're talking to your database,